Have you ever been wrong before, where you see someone on television and you go, I think that guy's guilty, and they're innocent, or vice versa?
Oh, sure. Because if you really want to know for sure if somebody is guilty or innocent, you need to invest a lot of time. You need to get a baseline on what they normally look like, talk like, feel like, and then knowing that baseline, you then need to compare how they're behaving on TV. So just walking by the screen and seeing it, you might see things that would ordinarily be lie behaviors that could just be part of their personality. So if you're going to really make a judgment, you got to put a lot of time in.
So I was watching this video from Joe Rogan's podcast, in which he had Dr. Phil on as a guest. They were discussing the topic of Jussie Smollett and spotting liars' body language and the behavior of people who are falsely accused or lying. And I kept seeing parallels between what they were discussing in regards to Jussie Smollett and the Michael Jackson allegations. Now, I'm not a fan of Joe Rogan in the slightest. He has his own issues when it comes to believing and spreading rumors, but sometimes I'll click for the guest he has on, and I'm glad I clicked on this one. I think it illustrates an important point without the bias that comes when discussing Michael Jackson. Dr. Phil warns viewers who want to make quick judgments to do their research, which is exactly what the MJ Innocent campaign and Michael's supporters want people to do. All we want is people to do their own research and to not make quick judgments based on a one-sided film or what the media tells them, because there's so much more going on here. You can't take one clip from his 50 years on this earth and use it to sum up the entirety of Michael. You have to look at everything.
Oh,
What does someone do if they're wrongly accused?
if they're wrongly accused, they'll look you straight up in the eye and tell you, I didn't do it.
Did you ever, as this young boy said you did you ever sexually engage, fondle, have sexual contact with this child or any other child?
Never, ever. I could never harm a child or anyone. It's not in my heart. It's not who I am.
And if you ask them, what do you think should happen to somebody that did? An innocent person will say, I think they should be found. I think they should be held fully accountable to the extent of the law. Somebody that's guilty will say, well, I don't know. I mean, people make mistakes. I mean, you got to give a guy a second chance.
And what do you think should be done to someone who does that?
To someone who does that, what I think it should be done, I think they need help in some kind of way.
Michael Jackson's nephew Taj says he's a survivor of sexual abuse by a relative on his mother's side. He shared notes of encouragement that he got from his uncle when he was a child.
As for Michael, Taj says that MJ was a support system for him and his mother during the abuse ordeal, and even tweeted a picture of a note he says MJ wrote to his mother. The note reads, Dee Dee, please read this article about child molestation, and please read it to Taj and his siblings. It brings out how even your own relatives can be molesters of children, even uncles or aunts molesting nephews or nieces. Please read, love MJ.
I have included the clips of Taj's own abuse to illustrate a surprising point that many people don't know. While Michael was being accused of child molestation and the world believed him to be guilty and he was being grilled on national TV by Diane Sawyer, he was aware of an actual child molester in his own extended family. He knew his own nephews had been abused. He had been a support for them and their mother, yet he never once sold his family out or used this other man as a scapegoat to get the heat off of himself. He never slipped up and outed his nephew's experience. He took the brunt of this without pointing the finger at anyone else. Imagine being accused of this horrendous thing and knowing your own nephews have been abused, and by someone in their family. Once you know that Michael had personal experience with his nephews being abused, you simply cannot look at these 1993 allegations or any subsequent interviews the same way. In the clip of Dr. Phil, he is speaking about someone lying about stealing money, so I don't know if the behavior would change depending on a much more serious accusation of child molestation. But he says that a guilty person would say, oh, give him another chance. Along with the knowledge that Michael knew of a child molester personally, which might affect his answer, you also have to take into account that Michael was an extremely forgiving person. He never wanted to use the word hate. Hardly ever, I can only think of 2 occasions off the top of my mind that he ever did this in his life, did he speak bad about someone publicly. He always wanted to see and believed in the good of people, and he had an extremely forgiving heart. He didn't believe people were inherently evil. He even talks to Rabbi Schmuley in his book, The Michael Jackson Tapes, about how he believed he could have changed Hitler's mind if he had been able to talk to him. And what if they wouldn't understand? What if they were like the Nazis, just evil people? I can't imagine that I couldn't reach their hearts in some kind of way. So you believe that if you were face to face with Hitler, you could? Absolutely. Absolutely. He had to have had a lot of yes people around him who were afraid of him. You believe that if you had an hour with Hitler, you could somehow touch something inside of him. Absolutely. I know I could. With Hitler? Come on, Michael. Hitler? So you don't believe there is anyone who is completely evil and there is no way to touch them. So you don't believe in punishing the wicked because then... No, I believe you have to help them, give them therapy. You have to teach them that somewhere something in their life went wrong. They don't see what they do. They don't understand it is wrong a lot of times. But Michael, there are clearly people who are irredeemable, like Hitler. He was evil incarnate. I'm going to clarify this. The interesting thing about how you look at the world is that you view it through a child's eyes. Okay, the other side of that is that just as children would find it difficult to grasp that someone can be truly evil, which is why kids are so trusting, you have the same issue. Even when evil stares you in the face, you want to say it has some good. So I wouldn't ask someone like you to construct a whole judicial system of punishment, because that's not what your contribution to the world is, and frankly, you'd do a bad job. A punishment comes into the world once you have adult-like gestures that are cruel, and then you need punishment. But in a child's world, those things don't really exist, so you don't need the same punishment. But come on, Michael. Do you really think you could have gotten through to Hitler? Uh-huh. Yes. In the same book, he recounts how empathetic he was to the 2 boys who murdered a child in England, to the point that it created tension in his marriage and everyone thought he was crazy. Plus, she had a fight with me one time when 2 little boys in London killed this other kid, and I was going to visit them because the Queen gave them adult sentencing for life. These were like 11 and 10-year-old boys, and I was going to go to the prison and visit them. She said, "You idiot, you're just rewarding them for what they did." I said, "How dare you say that?" I said, "I bet if you trace their life, you can find they didn't have parents around. They didn't have any love. Nobody there to hold them, look in their eyes and say, 'I love you.' They deserve that. Even though they're going to get life, I just want to say, 'I love you,' and hold them." She said, "Well, you're wrong." I said, "No, you're wrong." Then the information came out that they came from broken families, were never watched as little kids, attended to. Their pacifier was those Chucky movies with the stabbings and the killings, and that's how they became conditioned to it. Did she admit that you had a point? Nope. She thinks I'm rewarding bad kids. He couldn't believe that these young boys were evil, but instead thought that they must be cases of a bad childhood or their upbringing. Even then, he could not decry their actions as their own fault. So when Michael says that a child molester should seek help, he means it. He doesn't want to believe that they are forsaken. He only thinks that they need help.
I heard a cop once say that when people are guilty, they tend to plead and cry, and then when they're not guilty, they tend to get angry when they're accused.
People that are wrongly accused are generally irate from the beginning till the end. I mean, every case is different, but if you're wrongly accused, that person is going to be pissed off from the minute you accuse them till the end, because it's like, they're self-righteous, like, I didn't do this, and you're saying I did, and screw you.
Were you ever accused of having sexually molested Brett Barnes?
Won't answer that.
Me, Terrell, and TJ were the first ones flown up, when the allegations hit. We were the first ones flown up to him to be with him. And I can tell you, he was angry. He was like, "I'm not giving them a cent. This is what they do. You see this?"
I talked to my lawyers and I said, "Can you guarantee me that justice will prevail?" And they said, Michael, we cannot guarantee you that a judge or a jury will do anything. And with that, I was like catatonic. I was outraged.
How much money
Totally
was it?
Outraged. Because you get to a point where you get tired of people lying. I get tired of situations like this, where people completely lie on me, and I'm sick of it.
And what you should do before you decide you're going to be a human lie detector is do your homework, and you ought to try to figure it out objectively before you figure it out behaviorally. I mean, you ought to do your investigation, find out if somebody took the money, and, find out where they were, and, look for fingerprints and do this and do that. I mean, you ought to really objectively figure it out before you rely on these things.
In the last year alone, I've read countless blog posts, hundreds, a dozen books with more on my to-read list, watched his entire career from clips on YouTube. I simply cannot accurately convey how much research I have done. It's insane. Probably every waking moment in the last 10 months has involved Michael in some way, shape, or form. And it was never out of a fandom obsession. It was from this obsession that I wanted to know everything available so I could make up my own mind. It helped that every discovery was so interesting that it led down another surprising rabbit hole. But what I found changed my opinion forever. I learned things that I had never known before. I was shocked that some of these easily found facts never get so much as a mention next to his name in the press, and I was floored by how different his personal life was to his professional one. I was shocked to learn of his humanitarian acts, his kind heart, and his unwavering generous attitude. It was by learning more about who Michael was as a person and a human being that I became a fan. So while I was just starting my standing and I was knee-deep in research about the allegations against him when news of this film broke, which was both good and bad. On one hand, I was well equipped with fresh information in my mind to combat this false narrative, but my quiet, pure fan experience was immediately taken over by this emergency mentality and this crisis. I know how much research it takes to see the truth behind the lies. I know most people won't or cannot devote several months of their life to reading pages and pages of content and boring legal documents. If you don't want to do the research yourself, all I ask is that you listen to people who have. We've done the reading for you. We've done the research and posted it in easy to digest articles online. Just take a minute to listen instead of discrediting all of Michael's supporters as crazy fans who are only trying to defend his legacy and justify their love of his music. I'm not defending a pop star. I'm defending a man who is innocent. I'm standing up for truth. If only you would listen.
And then sometimes people accuse people of something, and someone will say, why would someone make something up? Why would someone turn themselves into a victim? Well, there's a lot of clout in being a victim, especially today. You get a lot of attention, a lot of love. I think there's a lot of false accusations and false attacks, and there's a lot of real ones. But man, when the false ones come, it just does a giant disservice to everybody.